Proclaimers are
authentic, powerful, brilliant,
creative,
happy, exciting,
and loud.
strident, fearless,
Full tilt, soulful rock and roll.
Total song music.
And Scottish.
I've been so sad since you said my accent was bad. He's worn a frown, this Caledonian clown.
30 years ago, the world of pop music was turned upside down and inside out with the release of the Proclaimers' debut album, This Is the Story. For identical twin brothers from Achtermachty, it was an unlikely success and propelled Craig and Charlie Reid to stardom.
The Proclaimers!
The Proclaimers!
Here comes the greatest man in the world, the Proclaimers!
Since then, the Proclaimers have gone from strength to strength, touring, writing, touring, releasing album after album, becoming cartoons, touring, having their songs adapted into a musical and film, and of course, touring.
I want to spend my life with you.
I'm a huge fan. I've bought every album and seen them live countless times over the years. I even had Life With You played at my wedding as I walked down the aisle. They never fail to make my heart fly, and so I was delighted to meet up with them to look back at their story so far. Craig and Charlie, hello.
Hello.
And what was the first Proclaimers song, do you remember?
Maybe Misty Blues.
Misty Blue, that was one of the first ones. Misty Blue was one of the first ones.
That's funny, I can't even remember. It might have been
Over and done with.
Over and done with, it could have been.
Right.
Yeah.
That was one of my Desert Island discs. And so you just sort of you got a kind of cache of songs together, and then
Yes.
what, took them to local pubs or what?
You did, yeah. We tried pubs. We tried getting gigs. We got very few gigs. Very few.
Got a gig in Nicky Tam's, a pub in Edinburgh. Did that gig for a few weeks, a few months or something. And then we met Kenny MacDonald, who's still a manager, and he became a manager. And then it started, everything that was not being sorted out started to be sorted out.
You were seeing it as a career. You weren't. It wasn't just something you were doing.
It was something. No, it's never. I've never really seen it as a career.
Oh right, even now.
No, it's something. It is something that it claims you, and you don't know how you're going to get there. You don't know what it's going to sound like, but that's what you want to do. That's the first thing. That's the number one thing is play music, and everything else has just got to fit in with that.
And where does Kevin Rowland come into it all?
We'd seen Dexys on the very first UK tour that they'd done in the very start of 1980. Oh,
I remember seeing them down the front of the stage at the very first gig, which I think was Edinburgh, and because you can't miss them, two guys who look very similar with the glasses, and great look. And of course, the following night, and I was thinking, oh, the two guys are down the front again.
They came on stage. It was something we weren't expecting. It was like being hit by a truck.
Right.
It kind of breathtaking how good they were and how unusual they were. We went backstage after, said hello to people, and met Kevin Rowland, and we just went to Dexys shows after they had kept in touch.
This man is looking for someone to hold him down.
We became friends, and they would come down, and we'd have these long discussions into the night, and they were very political. They were very vocal in what they thought, and you couldn't win an argument with them because there was two of them, but incredible passion, and I they inspired me. To me, they were like a conscience to me. They were like, because they were so honest, and they were so genuine, and they were so not willing to compromise.
And he kind of helped us out down the years, putting in contact with people, giving us demo time.
Yeah, they came down to Birmingham for a couple of days, and we recorded some demos, and I think I'd booked a couple of days in the studio because I'm just used to that, you know, demos taking a bit of time. And I think I sort of dropped them off at the studio, went in, introduced them to the bloke, and I went off somewhere. Came back about an hour later, and we've done them. And we're like, oh, okay. And I listened to them, and they were great, you know.
So he helped you get a demo together, and
yeah,
it was that demo that made it to Paul Heaton.
It was. Yeah, it was.
This is the same tape recorder we had in the van, which was our stereo system in those days. We used to get a lot of demos sent to our sort of postbox address, and we'd let them build up. And when we went away, the House Martins, we'd take all the cassettes with us and play them in the van. So yeah, sometime in early '86, late '85, their demo got played in a, you know, like a sort of battle of the bands inside the van. It took me by surprise straight away because half the stuff you heard, it was the 80s, you know, it was sort of right bang in the middle of the 80s. And it just, struck me as being very different. I couldn't work out where their roots were, which was great, you know, like, because most bands you could say, oh, God, they're trying to sound like the Smiths or they're trying to sound like Spandau Ballet or whatever. But with them, you couldn't. So that's, straight away, that struck them out. I suggested, you know, like, you know, this band are too good just to sort of be in the van. They're better than this.
Well, you tell us.
Yeah, somebody had got in contact with us and said that House Martins had mentioned us on the Janice Long show, the review thing that she did on a Friday evening. And it was like, what? You know, he's kind of the strangest thing in the world. And for some reason, we were able to get in contact with him, and we went down to Hull and spent a Friday night with them in the hostelries, or some of the hostelries at Hull. I think it was pretty much all the hostelries at Hull. Had a drink with them. I think that was to find out if we would be suitable
to go on the road.
Yeah.
Right.
So they supported us in '86, travelled all over with us.
First gig was in the Hummingbird at Birmingham. And probably the most scared we've ever been in our lives. We'd never played to anything more than probably 50 people. And you were on stage, and that was a big venue in Birmingham. I think there was a couple of thousand people there.
And nobody in that audience knew who you were.
No, close. No,
we thought we'd get bottled off every night.
Right.
And we didn't.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, it was a strange experience all around. You've never seen anything like it, because you don't know. You see it on telly and you go to gig yourself, and then to actually be up there in front of hundreds or maybe 1,000 or 2,000 people is. I'm kind of glad we did it when we were young. You know, I wouldn't fancy breaking through when you're 55. You know.
Yeah. Well, because you're fearless.
You're fearless.
Oh, yeah, they were brilliant, absolutely brilliant live. And the next step was to get them to make records that would convince the public. So we put them in touch with John Williams.
What a good place to be. Don't believe it.
I was producing the House Martins. They told me about this band called the Proclaimers and showed me this cassette, which I brought with me, which is the famous red cassette. And I listened to it and I thought, wow, these guys are amazing. They'd obviously been brought up on the Beatles and country music, but there was shades of rock and roll, and lyrically they were sublime. And I just thought, these kind of artists don't come around every single day of the week. I must get involved with this. And I flew them down to London, and this was the first time they'd ever been on an aeroplane, in fact. And they came down to London and performed it before the Chrysalis staff in the Chrysalis boardroom.
I think they stood on the old wooden desk in the office and played in front of people. And to hear that music live, that close up, it blows you away. Do you know what I mean? It's just like they were spitting their accents in your face. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, like that. So it was no surprise to hear John, John phoned us up and said they loved them, they want to release a record.
But the crucial factor in sealing the deal was Craig and Charlie's first ever TV appearance.
The biggest thing was the Tube. This was a big music show. It was 1 million people every Friday night. I thought we had to let them see them visually, so we shot for 50 quid. We shot a little video of Craig and Charlie standing down the Royal Mile singing Throw the Arroway.
I'm just gonna have to learn to hesitate to miss you my words on your Saturdays away.
Well, that swung it around, because all of a sudden after that went down, they had another production meeting, and I got the phone call, you're on.
Didn't Polly Yates introduce you something like that? Here's something a bit
said,
weird or something?
She said she was in the foreground. It said something like, now's here's for something really weird.
Yeah.
And she wasn't wrong.
Did you feel like you were something really weird?
Oh, God, I think we were always going to be fish out of water in everything that we did.
And now for something totally weird and unusual, identical twins singing. Craig and Charles Reid, alias the Proclaimers, come from Mukti in Scotland and supported the House Martins on their last tour. They're proud of being one of the few Scottish bands who don't sing with American accents. And here they are in their TV debut, another one, with Throw the R Away.
Well, I remember seeing the Proclaimers on the Tube, and they didn't look or sound like anyone else.
I've been so sad since you said my accent was bad.
Yes, their appearance with the Tube was baffling, I think, to most of the audience.
Two kind of geeky guys looking like folk musicians appear and then suddenly launch into it like the Clash.
You're like, who the hell are these guys? It was unlike anything anyone had seen. Even if you were a proper dyed-in-the-beard folkie in Scotland, you wouldn't really have seen anything like the Proclaimers.
Some days I stand on you green and pleasant land.
That was a massive show at the time.
It was huge.
It was massive. We went to the football the next day and we were standing in East Terrace in the Easter Road and people were coming up as we were buying a pie and a coffee and that.
Right.
People were coming and says, saw you last night, brilliant, eh? Fantastic. So you knew how many people watched the show and the impact it had.
It was an astonishing thing when the Proclaimers appeared, because they appeared out of nowhere, seemingly.
It was radical, in a way that was genuinely radical, in that it was a break from what everybody was listening to.
On the whole, the 80s was just the decade when music was kicked to death by the misuse of appalling, cheap digital technology. And obviously the Proclaimers made their records kind of at the height of that, the first records.
It was a time of highly cultivated images. If you want to contrast the Proclaimers, the obvious one would be to contrast with Bros, where you've got these highly photogenic twins who've been kind of polished to the nth degree by the record company. One of the things that came out in the 1980s was the ability to package subversive and rebellious so that something can appear to be without really rocking the boat. The fact that they pitched up looking and sounding like they did was one of the most genuinely rebellious and subversive acts of music in the 1980s.
The way they looked was different. And I don't mean just the fact that they were twins and they wore glasses, but they didn't dress like kids in a band. What you've got to understand is, whilst all these people were in the charts, like Spandau Ballet and Duran Duran, anybody who dressed like a straight was seen as a bit like the enemy.
They look middle of the road, don't they? They look like Roger Whittaker or something like that. But actually, they were real rebels, because everyone else was doing electronic music and the Proclaimers were just boom, 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 boom. That's rebellion. In a sweater, the chunky one, an Aran sweater.
People tend to think of them as kind of big folky, sort of coothy thing, but they're not. They were more punk than punks.
They were punks in the mid-70s. In Fife, they were proper punks. I'm pretty sure they saw the early tours of Scotland by the Clash and the Sex Pistols.
We'd read the Tony Parsons interview with the Clash in '77 in the NME. I'd read the interview before I saw the band. Right. There was no doubt after reading the interview that this was the way to do it.
And did you
feel very swept up in that.
Yeah,
kind of
I think
revolution,
it felt like it was ours, you know. It wasn't looking back at people who were 40 making music, you know. He says at 55.
And even though you were up in Scotland, it didn't feel remote, that kind of...
No, it didn't. It didn't. I mean, I think if you were interested in it and you felt it was part of you, I don't think it mattered where you were. Really.
Right. And then you formed a punk band, I believe.
Yeah, we formed a couple of bands. The first one was called the Hippie Hustlers.
Lovely name.
It was a good one. And the second one was called Black Flag before we even knew there was an American one.
One of many iconic champions of Craig and Charlie early on was Bill Drummond, later better known as half of the KLF. Musically and culturally, he felt a kindred spirit with the Proclaimers. You know, as a maverick, you don't get any more maverick than the guy who burnt £1 million and took a bunch of fake monks to the Isle of Jura and, you know, dropped a dead sheep at the Brit Awards.
It was 1986. I was 33 and a third years old. Things were going nowhere. Time for a revolution in my life. I decided to write, record and release my own album, The Man. I sung the songs in my own accent, and my long-term colleague David Ball said, just don't embarrass yourself, Bill. Nobody outside of Scotland wants to hear songs sung in a Scottish accent. But I didn't care. Then the next day, David Ball phones me up and he said he'd seen these two brothers on the tube singing in their own accent, a Scottish accent, and they were brilliant. He said we should sign them to our music publishing company, Zoo Music. But in those days, there was no YouTube or catch-up to check them out. I just had to take his word that they were brilliant, even though they sang in their own accent, a Scottish accent. So we ended up signing them to our music publishing company, Zoo Music. And these two brothers were brilliant, and they still are brilliant.
You know, someone like Bill Drummond, who doesn't do anything the easy or obvious way. I don't believe he's actually sat down for an interview in the traditional sense for this programme. If someone like Bill, you know, is on side, then you know you're doing something right.
At the time, all the Scottish bands, I mean, Simple Minds, Big Country, Hipsway, nobody was singing in their own accent.
No.
It was always kind of transatlantic kind of sound, and that was just accepted as the norm, wasn't it?
We'd gone to London 2 or 3 times and met a couple of people, and it'd always been, well, we like the songs, but the accent.
Oh, really? So you met quite a lot of resistance?
So it was there, you know. I couldn't see the point of writing songs about stuff that we knew and had observed and then singing it in a mid-Atlantic accent. I couldn't see the point of that.
And Throw the Arrow Away, that was the first single, right?
It was, yeah, it was. It didn't get very much play.
Did in my house.
I'm just gonna have to learn to hesitate and make sure my word on this.
That was what was striking about the Proclaimers. Someone said they're singing in their own accent, and you're suddenly going, right enough, so they are. Because you hadn't even thought about the idea of a band singing in their own accent, especially not a Scottish accent.
He's been so sad because you said his accent was bad.
We tend to keep our vowels very short. You know, we say shirt and skirt, whereas the English would say shirt and skirt.
It's definitely an easier way of singing with those really, really big open vowel sounds. And it's quite a decision to sing in a Scottish accent. I get the impression with them they probably didn't even think twice about it. The Proclaimers' Scottish dialect singing was more to do with punk than it was anything to do with anything political. Not even just punk, actually. Alex Harvey was the first person really to start singing in a really broad Scottish accent.
I followed a naked body and a naked body followed me.
And he was acting on the back of new wave and punk English artists who'd started to sing, admittedly slightly like Bert and Mary Poppins, you know, the Sex Pistols. But nevertheless, that was a really new thing where you could actually sing in your own dialect.
For me, it's kind of, I suppose as an artist, really, for want of a better word, it's all about integrity. It's all about getting to the truth. That's what it's about, and everything else comes from that. And that's what they were saying in that statement.
But it was a determination to do it our own way. and not sod the consequences, but accept the consequences.
That's quite ballsy if you're skint and you're meeting these people and they're kind of going, if you could just change that one thing, if you could just have a bit of a...
I suppose it is, but it was, you know, we were younger and we were determined and we fed off each other's energy about it, and the fact that we wanted our determination to do it the way that we would do it.
Please don't go rushing by. Stay and make my heart fly.
So tell us about recording that first album. You came to London.
We did. John Williams brought us down. So we hadn't really spent any time in the studio before. We were spent a couple of days trying out new guitars, because the thing I had was like something falling off the back of a lorry. You know?
Right.
So we tried a few new guitars, then 12-string and stuff like that. So a couple of days messing about with that, and then got into the recording the songs. Pretty much just set up, got the microphones right, and just played them until we got a version we liked.
'Cause I never seem to know the time when you with me.
But we kept it very intimate, and Charlie and Craig recorded most of their takes in the control room. I felt that I could make them sound huge without too many overdubs.
It's quite a tricky job for John, you know, producing it, to sort of bridge that gap between something that sounded fantastic as a demo, but something that had to be played on radio. You know, that's what they wanted. You know, they wanted it to be a successful record. So in a way, that was quite hard job. You know, but I think it achieved that, definitely.
Yeah, we knew Letter from America was the big track on the album in terms of how we'd reach people, and we also knew that we'd have to record it with a band, because, you know, you wouldn't get radio play.
Them and Kenny made an inspired choice with getting Jerry Rafferty, fellow Scotsman, someone who had great success in the 70s, to remix that record. In very blunt, pragmatic terms, that remix gave them a hit, and they were off.
This band, it's their very first time on Top of the Pops. This is a big hit, The Proclaimers and Letter from America.
The power of Jerry Rafferty's production on Letter from America was so amazing that it just blew everybody away.
I remember being in Chrysalis offices the Friday they'd come out, and the head of the company was dancing around the office, because basically they'd recouped their money in 5 days.
I think it went really well, and it was the way, I suppose, we got across to a bigger audience, and I had a pretty big hit record on it.
Yeah, very big hit record. It was, and also a record that mentioned Bathgate in it,
Yes,
which I think, as someone from Bathgate, I think it's the only time that's ever happened.
Probably. Give it time.
Yeah.
There'll be a country music song along pretty soon.
Maybe there will be. I'm not going to hold my breath.
Having two guys with acoustic guitars singing a song about the Highland clearances was not something that was going to shock anybody, because that's a familiar subject for folk music. Suddenly making it about steel plant closures, you know, making it metal no more, that changed everything. There's an edge to it. It's immediately relevant, and you understand what the song is all about at that point.
Letter from America came out at a time when I was getting really involved in politics. So it wasn't just that my hometown was mentioned in it, which in itself was quite a big thing, but it was also that it spoke about, you know, something about my country that was also motivating me to get involved in politics. So, you know, that song for me is the sort of anthem of my teenage years.
And it's also a very political track, of course, as well. That's just because that's what occurred to you, or because that's what you needed to write about?
It was written in, it must have been written about 1984. It was basically rage at what was going on. Both of us were disgusted by the callous way that unemployment was used to break organised labour, to break the spirit of people.
Has anger always been a motivating factor for writing?
I think it should be there. I think if you can channel it, and it doesn't feel like you're lecturing somebody or you're boring them.
People say it's their most political song. It's not. It's their most romantic. It's absolutely beautiful.
You should have held you. You should have told you everything was sense of time. We always wait too long.
It has a huge theme of loss and, longing for something that you've lost, even if you haven't lost it. I mean, people weep about that song who've never been to Scotland before because they're thinking about their own losses, something left behind that they can't ever recapture. It's the authentic feeling of humanity that absolutely underpins all Proclaimers' work, that they really understand what it's like to be human.
So when you came to record that first album, you had those songs all ready to go?
Yes.
So tell us about the writing process.
The first record was written in the flat in Edinburgh. I just remember afternoons in Edinburgh being when we were on the dole and just writing and writing and writing.
We just sort of sitting facing each other?
Yeah, throwing ideas about.
And then if we got that idea for a tune, we would both try lyrics and then would stick with what the better lyrical idea was and kind of work on that and just playing it. But a lot of just trying to strengthen the voices and make it powerful.
The Proclaimers' music is a great sonic photograph of the time. It's kind of like a diary. And they've got a very diaristic way of writing. So it's sort of like couple of Scottish guys' journal that you're looking at that's got a soundtrack to it,
If you think about the poppiness of the hooks, the tunes are all catchy. They burn themselves into your head. And then when you look at the hooky lyrics, I mean, how can you not love a song that starts, there's a touch upon my lips, left by memory's fingertips? That's a Patsy Cline song.
There's a touch upon my lips, left by memory's fingertips. I still hear her voice when there's no sound.
As songwriters, I think they're genius, actually. And the thing about them is they've got the common touch.
They seem like natural songwriters, therefore the arrangements come easy, etc. You don't think, and this is the real art to it, is you don't think, oh, there's Craig and Charlie just singing another song about breaking up with a woman. You listen to the song, and you do that with very good songwriters. You listen to the song.
One thing I know is good lyrics. That's the main thing. It's good lyrics. Craig is a little bit dark. He is. And that's good. I don't know if Charlie's lyrics are not so dark, but it's yin and yang.
When I was a younger man.
I'm not sure if they've ever written a bad song. Even if they're writing a love song, it'll be very blunt. They can be incredibly romantic, and they can elicit very powerful emotions, whether it's pride or whether it's sadness, and they do it without appearing to be pretentious or really trying too hard.
I wanna spend my life with you.
It's like they've built a Jaguar from the most basic Lego set. They don't even have a Meccano set. I think that's amazing.
Will you worry over a lyric? Because they're often your lyrics seem very witty, very crass.
It's not. I wouldn't say it was worrying. I'm certainly not a perfectionist, and I don't envy those who are perfectionists. If you've got the feeling at the beginning, the rest comes. You shift the key, or you learn to hit the note that you can't hit. But if you've got the feeling at the beginning, there's no worries.
What sort of creative arguments do you ever have? I mean, is it all quite...
Maybe more in the past, I think.
Right.
And you would... I don't know if we ever argued about... I don't think I ever argued about a subject matter. I don't think any subject matter was off limit. Maybe you would ask whether it was good enough or not.
But you don't fall out about...
You don't. But if they've got something that one of us really doesn't like, then we don't do it.
Right.
We don't do it. The veto is there. Right. If there's something that we don't, a song, then we won't do it.
There's never been a question of either of you working without the other.
Sooty and sweep. I think it's unlikely, David.
Right.
I think if we get through to the age we've got to now, I think the sole career and doing some of my numbers with the London Philharmonic.
I'd like to see that.
It's a lovely idea, isn't it?
Yeah. I'd like to see both your numbers with the London.
Wouldn't that be nice? That would please the public, wouldn't it?
Well, the Proclaimers' new album has already gone silver. It's only been out a few days. Here's the first hit from it. It's a number 14, an old record of the week. I love it. I'm going to be the Proclaimers.
Most artists have to contend with difficult second album syndrome. Not so with Craig and Charlie. Released just 1 year later, Sunshine on Leith featured their biggest hit to date and brought them to an international audience. Sunshine on Leith was a massive album with some massive hits on it, of course, which took you on a kind of global journey.
Yeah.
Was that something you were expecting? Was it?
No.
Or wishing for? Or?
No, it wasn't. I'm glad it happened. We recorded the record and we knew it was a really good record and we're very proud of it. And we knew that I'm Going to Be would be the first single. It became a huge hit in lots of different countries, and that song was the one that took us around the world.
I remember that it was banned in the US by certain radio stations, and it was because the DJs didn't understand some of the language, in particular the word haver, and they suspected that it had some kind of sexual context. It's very revealing that their default assumption was that it was some sort of sexual perversion. In fact, there was one American radio station that the quote they gave was something along the lines of, "We don't know what it means, but we suspect it's subversive." And the great irony, of course, is what the word actually means, which would be the perfect summation of all of the American DJs who were banning it. It means you're talking shite.
And if I ever, yeah, I know I'm going to be the man who secrets.
I'd have to say that 500 Miles is my favourite Proclaimers song. It's basically Scotland's national anthem. They should just change it. Flower of Scotland's nice and everything, but it should be 500 Miles.
The song was written. It was when we were touring with the first acoustic record, and we were playing up in Aberdeen, and I was getting picked up in an hour, and I just sat down, electric piano, and I started playing, and it came in like 45, 50 minutes, a whole lot, everything. One of the quickest songs I've ever written, and it was just like it was writing itself.
When I come home, I know I'm going to be the man who...
It's the reason we're able to carry on making records.
Oh, really? Is it that significant?
I think in terms of what it's brought in over the years, it pays for new records. It pays for tours. It underpins everything we do.
Because you've had you've had big hits. Letter from America was a big hit. I'm on my way is a big hit.
Nothing on that scale.
Just a different scale.
I don't know what it is. It's just something about it. It's indestructible, that record.
Does the fact that it's been so huge over so many years, does it ever rankle? Do you ever kind of want to go, listen to our new things?
No. The benefits completely outweigh the negatives.
You wouldn't play a gig without it?
No. If you wouldn't get out alive, it's not like the Beach Boys or something where you've had that many hits. Yeah. You want to do medleys and stuff. We've only had a handful of hit songs. So you do, if you're playing for an hour and a half, you do the handful of hit songs that you've got. A few other ones that people might know. It's not something that we have to worry about because we haven't been that successful.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I mean successful as in having hit after hit after hit.
Thanks, this is called Cap in Hand.
So, Cap in Hand, specifically, that came out of your desire for an independent Scotland?
Yes. We are absolutely total believers that Scotland should be an independent country, and I find it difficult when you meet people who that never given it a thought or completely opposed, and I can't understand them.
song like that in the hope that you will sort of proselytise and change people's minds, or just to express?
You're right.
something that
It comes from the same. It comes from the same root as love songs. I think, and all of them. It's that you feel something inside, and you express it through music, and you hopefully you're getting a tune that's memorable, and you're getting a lyric that is actually going to make somebody think, not necessarily change their mind or persuade them, but just that they're actually going to listen to it.
When they ask us, we boast, and we gather, we beg for a piece of
Their songs over the past 30 years have in many respects been the soundtrack to Scotland's political journey, and I think that has made the politics much more accessible at times to younger generations and brought politics alive. You know, not just Letter from America, but songs like Cap in Hand, you know, really in very, you know, simple terms, but in beautifully, you know, lyrical terms, telling Scotland's story in that way, I think was hugely important. Politicising, you know, small p politicising a generation of young Scots like me.
I learned from it because I grew up in an affluent area, went to private school, you know, middle-class Jewish boy, and listening to Cap in Hand, hearing this other view was illuminating.
I think they've been incredibly important as a protest band. I think one of the most important Scottish protest bands has ever been. You don't have to believe in the same political outcome that they want to believe that what they sing about is beautiful and right.
What you've got to understand about listening to bands like the Proclaimers, it's folk music, right? And folk music is of our island, you know, and that's what we talk about. We talk about love and politics and history and all sorts of things. It is part of our culture, and it's part of our culture to, when we get on stage, tell people what you think. So simple as that, isn't it?
My heart was broken. My heart was broken. Sorrow, 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 sorrow.
Sunshine and Leith was a single too.
It was the second or the third single, and it didn't chart. They wanted to do a big edit on it, and we said no. The song "Hands Against" was nearly 6 minutes long, so it's not going to get a lot of play on radio, you know. But Sunshine Leith again, I think, is one of those songs that has become bigger down the years. People, they hear it and it goes in, and then when you actually start playing live shows, that is probably the one that connects you to the audience even more than 500 miles.
It's sunshine on Leith. I'll thank him for his work, and you birth and my birth.
Sunshine on Leith, it's this beautifully nostalgic song that just makes me cry every time I hear it, even though it's like anthemic crying.
You saw it, you cleaned it, you touched it, you saved it.
It's a good song, and it's in the spirit of folk and rock.
The writing in it is so pared down. It feels like a really personal, intimate song about a specific feeling between two people. And yet, you know, it's the best football song you'll ever hear. You know, 10,000 people on the terraces can sing it and everybody's going to be in tears.
Well, Sunshine on Leith was an unlikely song for football fans to have adopted. It's got an unlikely metre. They do like something that's a bit more tub-thumping. And they do tend to like something that has an element of goading in it, and it doesn't. It's a lilting and quite melancholy song. You only understand how well it works when suddenly there is 10,000 folks singing it in a football stadium.
That's when you know you've got something.
Yeah.
If your own people sing your own song, then nobody's forcing them to do it.
Yeah,
You know,
that-
so
that
they
must
do
be-
it on their own because they feel it. So that's good.
That must be quite moving for, you know, as lifelong fans.
I think it is. It's very moving, yeah, and it's something that it feels it links you more to the club, and it's part of maybe of the club's culture now, and that's fantastic for us.
I don't think as Scottish people we're necessarily famous for our emotional accessibility. Is that something that you use your music to access, or is that something? Are you very touchy-feely people?
I think no, we're not at all. The music is the thing that we channel. Yeah. That I think to be a creative person, you want to create, you want to express yourself. That's the first thing, whatever it is you're doing, and we express ourselves through our music, and we do it to the absolute best that we can, 100%. Life is short, you never know when it's going to end, and you've got to give everything that you've got.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful truth. Don't leave because I can't see you. Beautiful.
I think the whole thing about the Proclaimers is the truth. They look in real life as they look on stage, and they sound in real life as they sound on stage. It's unfettered, it hasn't been tampered with. What you see is what you get. And people respond to that.
Do you find that the more honest you can sort of push yourself to be, the more of a response you get from the audience?
I think that is usually the case, or it's very often the case. I don't think it's always the case. I remember Kevin Rowland saying to me many, many years ago that there was certain section of the audience or any audience who didn't really like stuff too real. And I think there is a section that really don't. And I think in any song, in any art form, you can get so real that you might be even pushing your own fans away. But I think, generally speaking, if you can be as honest as you can, you do get a better response, but not always.
I think it embarrasses them. It makes them look at things they don't want to look at. I think that's what it is. Yeah. I mean, it confronts them to face things they don't want to face.
I think sometimes when you're confronted with that kind of openness and honesty, you're wondering whether there's some there's some ulterior motive at work, and I don't think there is. I think it's just a real a raw openness that you were presented with.
The success of Sunshine on Leith was followed by a top 10 hit with their King of the Road EP in 1990, and then the album hit the highway in 1994, which contained the top 40 hit Let's Get Married.
We've been going together.
But then Craig and Charlie became strangely silent. They wouldn't release another album until Persevere 7 years later.
You wait years for the next album. I mean, years. What were they doing for those 7 or 8 years? Do you know?
Both our wives were having children. I think you needed a rest as well after kind of, especially the Sunshine and Leith thing. I think that when your life is in a different place, especially when the children coming along, then you kind of feel your priorities are somewhere else.
In retrospect, it was a good thing because it stopped us getting jaded with the road. You know, I think if you're on the road all the time, then you do get jaded with it.
We are born innocent, found guilty, living life is treated like a crime.
So how did working with Edwin Collins come about?
We initially worked with Edwin when he was producing the music for the film version of The Slab Boys by John Byrne, and he was getting different singers to come into his studio in West Hampstead and do songs that did a couple of rock and roll songs. And we enjoyed meeting Edwin, admired what he'd done in his own career, and really enjoyed the studio, really enjoyed the kind of relaxed atmosphere, a great time there. So we felt that we could do a whole album with him, and we did. the next album with Edwin, and it was really a very, very enjoyable experience, and it felt very natural, and I think Edwin did a really good job on that.
Found guilty every time.
Charlie and Craig prepared immediately.
Yeah, immaculately.
Yeah.
And they're very clear about what they want.
Yeah.
They're experienced by that time as well.
True. Immediately, it was a balance.
Edwin's pretty mad in the studio. He's like a mad professor. What a brilliant combination, Edwin Collins producing The Proclaimers. What a great idea.
In terms of the songs, and in terms of the vibe in the studio, and in terms of how everybody was getting on and how it worked, I think probably the most enjoyable record, for me anyway, that we've made over the years.
Right.
Just the sound of people, 4 or 5 people, you know, playing music and just loving it. And Edwin gets it.
You better let down, messed around, told to get your feet back on the ground when you should have been loved.
It was two great Scottish institutions coming together. Edwin, by that time, had this great studio in London, which was stuffed full of vintage kit. No bells and whistles, which is just how Craig and Charlie like it.
One of the songs with Charlie's voice.
Oh, blow the capsules.
Blows the capsule in the microphone. So it's loud, but it's the power, isn't it? It's the power, which is different to loudness, isn't it?
Yeah. It's fairly loud. Isn't it?
Is it true that you broke some of Edwin Collins' gear?
If it isn't true, it should be. You know, it's always been an ambition of mine. I like when you hear some of the old stuff like Little Richard records, Larry Williams, and the vocals are so high that that's the distorting the mic. It's really exciting that. And half Edwin's gear was from the 1920s and 30s. I think it was a lot of old gear. It's some of it worked and some of it didn't. So if we broke it, his mic, we'll accept responsibility.
He's got that thing, his studio had that thing of, you think things happen here.
But now you detractors underestimated you, 'cause they don't know you like I do.
The songs that you sing and the way you sing them, they have such a personality. The syncopation, the kind of guttural noises that you sprinkle through and all that. Was that something that just emerged?
Yeah, guttural noises. That's one way to put it.
We designed that. We designed that, David.
It's just the way it is. I think probably a lot of it is the people you enjoyed listening to.
Exactly.
When you were going, you want it. You listen. You take I never wanted to sound like somebody like that, but you absorb it.
Yeah,
and so you get people. We always admired people who could actually sing, and by singing I mean actually project their voice. A lot of people who can sing have got very good voices, but they can't actually belt it.
I think when they're sounding angry, they sound like two voices in competition, and they sound like twins. They sound like two twins who are fighting for food, really. That's how raw they sounded. Like two little kids at a table going, mate, like that.
It's call and response, and it's not many artists have this kind of chemistry where one starts, one finishes, one ends, one begins, and it's just a blend of powerful musical genius.
Well, and you can definitely hear the influence of Dexys. Kevin Rowland's vocal gymnastics, you can hear in both of their voices.
And it's particularly Craig's voice. It's kind of righteous, He's not taking any prisoners. And that's not something that he's decided to do. That's like inherent in him. He sings it with total conviction and total belief. And again, it's not like a forced thing. Yeah, it's not like that. It's just you know, you can't really not believe him. I think Charlie is a great singer in his own right, actually. And I'd actually like to hear him sing more.
Over the years, the Proclaimers' success has continued to grow. I'm Gonna Be earned them a gold disc in America after featuring in films such as Benny and June, The Bachelorette and Pitch Perfect. And of course, a certain green ogre brought I'm On My Way to the attention of a whole new generation of fans. More recently, playwright Stephen Greenhorn used the raw materials of Craig and Charlie's songs to create the hit musical Sunshine on Leith. Craig and Charlie have even been stretching their own acting muscles, however briefly, with an appearance in the film version of Sunshine on Leith, as cartoons in Family Guy, and also with superfan Matt Lucas in a music video he directed for them.
Oh, look at that. They came up with this idea to do a home video of an anniversary party. I'd written these two old lady characters and hadn't thought, oh, I'll ask Craig and Charlie to play the old ladies. And then it was only when I rewrote it, I thought, of course, I'll get them in drag, is what I do.
How much persuasion did that take?
He did it the right way. He said, we'll do the video will do this way. You'll be singing in a corner, and then we'll get a couple old ladies doing the stuff. And then, that's a great idea. Then they came back a few days later. Would you be the old ladies? And I thought,
I wouldn't play him at cards.
At first, they were very reticent, and they said they're not dressing up in drag. And then, I don't know what made them change their mind. Maybe I got the correct bra size, and they were finally convinced.
He did it well, and it was a very, very enjoyable day, and it was an enjoyable experience.
Once the boys had made the decision to drag up, well, they couldn't get into those clothes fast enough.
Let me rephrase, and I think there's a better line there. Sailing around in the air.
You're not going
to not something
tour like
we're
that.
Not going to pursue it.
No. Well done for trying. You know.
Thank you.
If the music career ever takes a dip, we could reboot Little Britain, and Charlie and Craig could take our roles because they were very natural.
That's it. Party's over.
Fascist.
Right.
You always do a great gig. Do you still get nervous? Do you still get the fear?
Yeah, we do. Not as much as we used to.
Sometimes you get nerves and you don't know why it's happening, you know. I think it's always good to have that. You should never take anything for it. You shouldn't be on autopilot at all. No. You should be going in there, and the energy should be going through you, because that's what's going to communicate what you're thinking and feeling to the audience. We have a larger audience now because we've played so many shows. We've been all over the place, and if you keep delivering, I think people keep coming back.
Yes, I know I'm gonna be the man who's working hard for you.
I mean, they have a Presbyterian work ethic which is staggering. They just tour and write and perform, and they don't stop, and they carry on being political activists at the same time. That's really Scottish. I love that. I love that very much. No indolence in the Proclaimers.
I'm good friends with a great singer called Robin Hitchcock. And he said to me, when he saw me play for the first time, he goes, "Oh, you've got the Scottish boot." I went, "What do you mean the Scottish boot?" And he goes, "The Scottish boot just goes like that all the way through the song." And it was just like, I saw it then, you know. honestly, I feel like if you went into the wardrobes of a collection of Scottish artists, myself and the Proclaimers included, the left heel of every pair of shoes is like going to be an inch shorter than the right.
I think they're great performers because they're very in the moment as performers. They're just totally in it, and it's kind of what it's all about, really.
The reality is that you don't get remembered for many things, you get remembered for a few things. And so, in truth, the Proclaimers probably will be remembered for I'm Gonna Be. And that's great. I mean, it's a brilliant song.
I think people will look back at Proclaimers and go, utter legends. Utter legends. There's never been anybody like them before. And I think we'll have to wait a long time to see anything similar.
I'm not gonna talk about it. I'm not gonna talk about it. I'm not gonna talk about it. I'm not gonna talk about it.
Their true value isn't going to be understood until they're gone. And then people are going to look back on a body of work which is kind of incomparable. I'm convinced that my grandkids will be going, God, did you see them live? Did you see these guys live?
Legacy. We'll leave that to the likes of Tony Blair to worry about legacy. We'll all be 6 foot under, it won't much matter.
I'm thinking about being...
Immortal?
No, 180.
Oh, before you die?
Yeah.
When I started walking the west shore, my eyes obscured my vision.
I think one of their legacies will be that you can sing about specifically local things, in their case, Scottish things, whether it's politics or culture, and have an international appeal.
I walked through the country, I walked through the town, I held my head up and I didn't look down.
Nobody's going to look back on the Proclaimers and say, oh, that was the mainstream. Do you know what I mean? That's what people did then. Do you know what I mean? That was the sound of Scotland, because it wasn't. But I think, in a way, that gives them a timelessness.
So the intention is to keep going.
Just keep avoiding what? Keep going. I mean, I think we enjoy it as much, if not more, than we did.
Some people quit too early, don't they? And some people go on too long. And the trick is to know when to get out. And if we are no longer up to muster, then you should quit. And I know we will. So if we're not, we'll be the first. We won't need to be told.
Well, I hope that won't be for many, many decades yet.
Very optimistic. You're very optimistic, David.